All right, here we are looking at Crime and Punishment, Part 4 today. What were you guys' first impression of this section of the book?
This one read pretty quickly, I think is a good way to describe it. There was a lot going on at the same time as not very much. You know, we had Rodion, sort of putting on this face after pissing off everybody that has come into the picture up to this point, and sort of having a bit more control over his moral place right now. He's a bit more sober minded, but still clearly quite distressed. But he's trying to fix the relationships that he had and make some actions. But then, of course, the ending was a bit of a twist.
Yeah, it seems like this part was more of an expansion of part three, I would say. A lot more detail, same structure, just more expanded upon.
What did you think, Scott?
I agree with the quickness of it, but I don't know if that's just because I'm also reading Atlas Shrugged. I got through this whole little section in just an afternoon or so. It all just kind of breezed by.
And
Are
of
you
course,
saying
the tension is still there as well when Rakozanov is being brought to the station for questioning. And there's also that one moment where one of the witnesses recognizes Rakozanov. And there's also I forgot what the character's name was, but
Savija Galov? Is that the one?
yeah, that's him. Yeah, he's. I guess the best way to describe him is he's not only cowardly and annoying, but he's also a mirrored image of Rakozanov, a more insane version of Rakozanov happening in real time. And you can see a side by side comparison of both of those characters.
I think it was really interesting having him show up because he's the guy that is blamed for killing his wife, Martha, right?
Mm-hmm. It's speculated anyway.
It's speculated, yeah. So he shows up literally to say that his wife has left Rodia's sister 3,000 rubles and would like to give Rodia's sister 10,000 rubles. And if Rodia had waited 6 days and committed this crime down the road or put it on the shelf for a week, all of his monetary problems would have been resolved by this character because he's showing up and wanting to give the family money, and the family constantly wants to give Rhodia money, and now he's stuck dealing with the fact that A, he's committed this crime, B, this crazy guy who just showed up has the means to deliver his whole family out of poverty, but he could never actually appreciate the life delivered from poverty now that he's completely destroyed his own sense of self by committing this atrocity.
Mm-hmm. And his goals almost seem to align with this Savija Galov guy too. Because he shows up and says, I don't want your sister to marry Mr. Lucian. And Roge is just thinking, hey, I don't want that either. But he still won't make a deal with this guy.
Yeah, it was really weird. Obviously, I ship Razumihin and Dunya because why wouldn't you?
Oh yeah,
They're so
dude.
cute.
That's the OTP right there.
um, but okay, so what is Dunya's currently, well, no longer currently betrothed? Is it Pyotr?
Peter Petrovich
Yeah.
Lucian.
So, what did you think reading about that whole breakdown with that interview and Rhodia's assumptions about who this man was in comparison to the character I just asked you a moment ago in Atlas Shrugged, the relationship Jim Taggart makes with the poor shopkeeper Cheryl?
Yeah, that was a pretty good dynamic because like both Jim and Lucian both want like the same kind of relationship. They both want someone poor to worship them and always be above their wife, and just they don't want a partnership. They just want to save someone and be the hero in their eyes. Because when we read from Jim's point of view, he calls Cheryl a hero worshiper like every chance he gets. And that's what he really likes about her. And you see that brought out very clearly in Lucian's character here. He just wants to find a hero worshiper. And
But
as
what
soon as
I
he
found,
realizes that Dunya doesn't like fall into that archetype, then he wants her even more. He's like, well, she's not a hero worshiper. She's never gonna, be what I want, but I still want her.
what's interesting too is that with Jim, he does get Cheryl, and Cheryl
Mm.
turns around and tries to do everything she can to bring herself up to his level because that's her husband, and they are now high class society couple, and she does everything that she can to stop being this poor muse, essentially, that he sees her as, which completely destroys the dynamic for Jim. And it never even gets to that point for Pyotr and Dunya, because Dunya luckily has this family member that says, no, this guy is just abusive. He wants to control you. This isn't what you need, and don't do this. And it would have, in the long run, led to both of their dissatisfaction in the relationship. It's kind of cool to see that alternate reality.
Yeah, and I really like how Dunya stands her ground against him. Doesn't let her bully him around or anything like that. He tries to attack the mother, and no one's having anything there.
Yeah, he really went into that thinking that he had the upper hand, and I think it'll come back and bite Rhodia in the butt in the next section or two. Just from the way it ended there, he seemed to be quite scornful and hateful of Rodion.
And they talk a lot about the emancipation of the serfs in this section.
Yeah, that is brought up again.
Especially in the bits with Lucian where he's talking about how he wants to be the hero and he relates to the part of the country that freed all the slaves, kind of thing. So
I'll have to do some reading on that.
you see the same kind of virtue in Jim and Peter Lucian here.
Another really interesting part I found was when Rhodia actually went to Sonya's place and was just, I guess, seeing in her something that was broken in himself and trying to relate to her and really fleshing out how it is that she's survived having destroyed her own life, and comes to the realization that it's through God being her salvation and her only rope to hold on to that has stopped her from taking her own life. And then to have her read the resurrection of Lazarus, that was a very interesting scene. It kind of gets into the whole Russian Catholicism and how much faith is intertwined with this culture.
Yeah, and this was before the whole Cold War and before, Joseph Stalin, before communism rose in Russia and they tried to make it into a secular state. Orthodox Christianity is still very much the standard in Russia. And you see how Rogia calls Sophia a religious maniac or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he switches right after to saying that, oh, you're a religious maniac, I'll be one soon too. It's infectious, isn't it?
Yeah. The whole interviewing process, or I guess the interrogation process, found to be the weirdest part of this whole section, though, because the entire time Rhodia knows he's being interrogated and examined, and he's in a trap. But at the same time, see, now this is where I really dislike the Russian names, because every time I try and think of the name of the investigator, I just think Pyotr. Pyotr? What's the investigator's name?
Porphyry?
Porphyry. So Porphyry is just waltzing around and being very weird. Like, he's literally dancing with Rhodia. There's no other way to describe it. Instead of interrogating.
It's like a game of cat and mouse, or a game of chess almost.
And it's described that way too. Very poignant. But it's so much more than that. Like, he thinks a lot like Pyotr going into the room with Dunya and the mother and brother. He thinks he's got the upper hand in this interview process, and he's dancing around and being friendly and trying to lull Rhodia into this false sense of security. And just when he's almost got him, we get this twist, and this other guy that they had tried to pin the murder on comes in, bursts in, and admits to the crime.
And he's not even really that sneaky about it. Like as soon as Rogia says, "Oh, you're trying to lull me into a false sense of security," he's just like, "Well, yeah, I am trying to lull you into a false sense of security. What did you think was going on here? Just playing mind games with him."
Yeah. But then all the while saying, "Oh, I don't think you're guilty. I don't think you're guilty. I just think that smart men break down and admit to me, and I can let them walk around the town and let them destroy themselves."
Yeah, and he tells another little story about how people that haven't done the crime have convinced themselves that they have, and they end up confessing to the murder, which seemingly is exactly what happens towards the end of this meeting.
And he makes the metaphor, so that's why I wasn't thinking it's cat and mouse. He makes this metaphor that Rhodia is like a fly coming too close to Piofer and eventually will land in his mouth. Like he's a spider and he's spinning this web and he's making this graceful artistic web of confusion for Rhodia to eventually land in, the whole time just carefreely going about spinning his web, just joyfully doing it. Like this is what he is on this planet to do. So it's kind of cool. I like the depth to that character. And he's only like 35, they say. And he speaks of the nature of the 20-something-year-old Rhodia, how he puts intelligence and wit above all else, as he should, as he's this youthful man. And he did the same thing when he was his age, but now he's seen the world and learned more and understands that this is just a phase in the maturity of the mind. I gotta say, though, the Crime and Punishment book has been a bit of a slog. In spite of its easiness to read, I'm not getting as much out of it as I would have hoped.
What were you hoping for?
I don't really know. I find that like even between the three of us, it's hard to keep a conversation going on this subject. Like it's good. I respect it. I see where it's coming from. But I said it before and I'll say it again. Like you shouldn't murder people. And you don't need 420 pages of classic Russian literature to teach you that. And if you do, yeesh.
Well, it is, but it's kind of, you have to be patient with it. You have to let the psychology flourish when something like murder occurs. When someone murders somebody, we have to understand that it's not just a typical, oh, it's a, one guy kills someone, he's trying to cover his tracks, and he's trying to get away with it, and other witnesses are connected to the main character, and who knows what might happen. It's, you have to be very patient with it, not just psychologically, but philosophically. So I think that's the reason why you just have to be patient with it. That's what I have to say.
Well, I'll say this. It's no Harry Potter.
No.
I don't need a sequel. I'm glad there isn't a sequel.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not like it's a thriller. It's a psychology book.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
what,
try-
it's almost educational.
It's not a book to tell you not to kill people. It's a book to tell you what the actual consequence to killing someone is. It's not just 25 to life. It ruins you as a person.
It's like a case study.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good way of describing it.
And I'm glad I'm reading it. Don't get me wrong. Like I am pleased that we're discussing it, and I will be certain to use it to bolster my pretentiousness in future conversations about the Russian literature.
Yeah. Well, have you read Crime and Punishment? Because I have.
So you talk of murder and you haven't even read the Dostoevsky classic on crime and punishment?
Yeah, like there's definitely some value that I've gotten from this book. It's just hard to articulate that value without just saying things like, "Oh, that's why you shouldn't kill somebody."
Right?
Like I can see lots of like similarities in like my own psyche when I'm reading this, like, "Oh, okay, that's just another little bit of added perspective." So, it has its own value, but it's not really enough to like pull a quote out and discuss it with a book club. It's really more of an internal experience that you just kind of tap into without really noticing it.
Yeah, it's not really like one of those things that you're going to read on your own after clicking our affiliate Amazon link and earning us $1 and go out and talk to your friends about and share this experience with. It's one of those books that you read it because you ought to, and it'll stay on your bookshelf so that others may read it. But you're not having parties about it, and you're not having afternoon beach day conversations about it. It's just a notch on the bedpost of books. The owner of the used bookstore actually in town, I went down a few weeks ago to try and find a copy. I've just resorted to renting it from the library because I can't find it anywhere. But when I asked her about it, her response was, I think, somewhere along the lines of, "Ugh, the Russians. I tried to read that book with a friend, and we never got past the first sentence." And she is a very intelligent lady. She was on council. I don't know if she's still on council, but she's very well read. But apparently, she had no interest in reading Crime and Punishment.
Probably more into modern feminist writings.
That's sexist.
Yeah, my bad.
Well, it'd be interesting.
Probably earning more money than you are, Scott.
Absolutely.
That's classist. It would be interesting to see what kind of reaction Notes from Underground elicits from us, because that's the other one by Dostoevsky, right? That's quite remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
I have it on a bookshelf, so if we want to get into it, but I don't know, one Russian book per season is probably good for me. Just because of the names, you know, like as soon as I brought it up, I was like, oh, there's going to be 15 more names with 4 different versions of the name. And even when we're talking about the names, I'm sure listeners are like, wait, who's Lucian?
Yeah, it's going to be very familiar. So familiar.
I used to have a problem with watching anime because I could never keep track of the names, but this is nothing compared to Crime and Punishment.
Yeah. And also, why are some of the names in the book completely cut off, just down to the first letter and then a period? So like, oh, down by V.
Yeah, I don't know. That's like
And you're like,
some kind of like boulevard or whatever.
and it's like, well, what's V? Like, where's V?
I think there was one point in the book where it calls it like Vasilevsky, but then it changes it to like V and a dash. I don't know if that's just a translation error or what's going on.
I need like a reader's companion. It was interesting too. So we haven't even talked about it, but Razumihin wants to make a publishing firm and translate books, and he speaks 3 languages.
Well, Roja speaks 3 languages. It doesn't say how many Razumihin speaks.
Oh, was it saying Rodia speaks 3 languages? I thought it was saying Razumihin speaks 3 languages.
I might have misinterpreted it. I'm not sure now.
Someone speaks 3 languages.
One of us is right.
and good on that character for having been written to have learned 3 languages.
Because in like the earlier parts, isn't it Razumihin that gives Rogia some paperwork to get translated into German? And then he comes back and says, "No, I don't want to do it. I'm crazy."
Yeah, but I thought that was just because Rodia spoke German.
Yeah, maybe.
And Russia seems to be quite intimate with Germany. You notice that like they don't bring up many nationalities, but the Germans show up a few times.
There's lots of history there, like the Prussians and such.
The lines seem to be blurred. I like to know what they're talking about when they say that they believe in the New Jerusalem.
That's like, when Savior comes back and brings heaven on earth.
Oh, so the whole world is going to be called Jerusalem when Jesus returns?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Huh.
Well, because, like, Jerusalem, isn't it just the kingdom of God or the city of God or something like that?
I don't know, man.
I'm not sure how it translates. I know Israel means to wrestle with God, but I don't know what Jerusalem translates into. But I think it's a metaphor for, all of God's people will one day belong to the New Jerusalem or the new kingdom of God when the day of judgment comes. That's my understanding of it, anyway.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, I'm curious to see what happens in the next section, of course, with this, because it sets it up so that Rhodia can feel a bit of a breath of fresh air and take a minute and take stock and do something now that they have a new guilty party in custody. He's got a minute to figure out what he's going to do going forward. And it seems like he's going to go and talk to Sonya again.
But after the whole thing with the publishing company, Roja just kind of tweaks again, just kind of leaves. And Razumihin runs after him, and they have like a stare down in the hallway. And then Roja declares that he's leaving his family afterwards.
Yeah, he abandons them.
Razumihin has to stay no matter what. But he doesn't tell him if he's going to come back or not. But then when he's talking to Sonya later, he says that I've abandoned my family. And we should run away together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll see. Like it seems that we're getting to the point where Rhodia is going to confide in someone. Sonya probably. It seems like Razumihin almost has a sliver of an idea that perhaps Rhodia is a terrible human being. So we'll see how much they fit into the picture in the next sections.
Yeah, I'm just pulling for our good buddy Razumihin to get with Dunya.
Honestly, that's a sequel I would read.
Yes.
Dunya and Razumihin's publishing company. I don't really have anything else to add, though. I'm sorry, I don't have the zealous momentum that I do when we're talking about other books like Shrugged or Meditations.
Yeah, this one is, like I said, it's more of an expansion of our last part. All the suspense is building up.
We're entering a second climax. We started with the climax, and then it kind of slowed down, and now it's starting to ramp up again.
Just have to get through that lull in the middle.
Well, until next time.
May the force be with you.
Or equal to mass times acceleration.